Hi guys, so last time we looked at Monster X, I'll pronounce it with the emphasised A this time, but today we're going to be looking at the rookie group that everyone's talking about and one of the best performers currently out there in K-pop, Ateez. Let's go. A thing to say before we get onto the ranking, the Q&A that I talked about in my community post, I will be doing this after this video. It'll be a couple of days after this, but we're definitely going to do it and get to a lot of the questions because there's some really good things to unpack and some things you want to know. So I'll let you guys know as when we do that Q&A. Okay, so Ateez were really hard to rank. I'm fully aware they're a rookie group still, or considered a rookie group, so they're still growing, their voice is still all maturing, they haven't fully worked out everything with their vocals yet, but they have some really good singers and no one's like particularly bad. A lot of people have a similar ability, particularly in the middle to lower order of this particular ranking. So it's going to be an interesting thing to actually look at, the vocals they have, the potential they've all got. But without further ado, let's look at the Ateez vocal ranking. Okay, so as always, somebody's got to be last, and there's a bit of a joke online that Mingi's going for Jeongho's main vocal title, and while maybe not yet, his voice has potential, he does some very interesting things with it, so let's have a look.
너를 바라만 보던 너를 기다린다고 말할까 우리 존재만으로 서로를 더 빛나게 해 함께 갈 수 있어
팔로우
누구나는 흔하디 흔한 이야기 마지막 모든 너와 너란 별을 비춰줄게 이렇게 너를 바라만 보던 너를 기다린다고 말할까 기다리면서 아무 말 못하고 그리워만 건데 이 순간 뜨거운 태양 아래서 그 이유가 우리 맘에 들어.
So Mingi's voice is very unique and has qualities that are very individual and his own. So it sounds like he's got a really deep voice, and he kind of does, but his voice is still a little bit lighter than you think it is, but he just puts it really far back. So for example, when he's singing one line, he goes, oh, but that I could disagree, yo. Like he sings everything really far back in his head, so it gives everything his open, big, rich, full sound. But because of that, he doesn't have too much space to go into. That sound kind of only works where it works, and it has this kind of big, robust, deep feel to it, but it doesn't give you any avenue to mix or get up into a higher register. That's why Mingi, when he sings, when he's kind of in his lower range, he sounds full, he sounds rich, he's a little bit off pitch now and again, his tuning isn't as adept as more seasoned singers. That's kind of why he doesn't sound that good all the time. But in terms of a dynamic range, it's pretty decent. Down low, he stays kind of breathy, or he can stay full, and he has a decent ability down there. As he brings his voice up, however, because he puts his voice further back, to compensate for that for volume, he just pulls chest voice exclusively. He occasionally, by accident, can mix some notes now and again, which sound kind of okay, but as he moves into his head voice, he has no ability up there, really. He hasn't really got much practice in that area, and his voice doesn't sound really comfortable doing anything other than that really belty shout he's famous for. But that belty shout, unfortunately, due to kind of the way he does everything, it's quite limited. As he brings it up, it's pulling pure chest voice, which is why as he gets into his higher belts, when he's really going for it and showing passion in his performances, be it joking occasionally, but he's seriously singing sometimes, his voice kind of goes into his throat and sounds really crackly and kind of strained. It's because he's just bringing up so much weight. Mingi's voice, if he wanted to and lightened his tone, sacrificed a bit of power, and tried to get into a mix, it could be pretty decent. Like, dynamically, he's clearly got a range he can work with, and he's got quite a lot to his voice, just he doesn't use it properly right now, and as I say, he kind of gets stuck in this far back position with his vocals, and he brings up chest voice to compensate for that for a really big sound, but it can be strained, and it doesn't have the mixed bridge or particularly great falsetto use. So right now, his voice has potential to be okay if he worked on it more, and did kind of the opposite technique, if he went breathy as he went up, or light as he went up, and then stayed more full as he went down, rather than just pulling chest. So yeah, he kind of doesn't really use his voice very well right now, but he could do in future, and I know he could, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, Mingi, not a great vocalist by any means yet, but certainly has the tools to be one in future. So these next three positions, I had a really hard time ranking because they all sing in a kind of different way, and I was trying to work out which I valued the most in terms of the vocal technique. So to me, Yeosang has the least practiced voice, but that's kind of down to lack of lines, but we'll get into that. Okay, so Yeosang is the other member of Ateez who has kind of a deeper, fuller voice. There is one more coming up, but we'll get to him. But his voice he sings a lot of the time just where he's comfortable. He stays in his lower chest range most of the time. Again, this is because he doesn't have that many lines, so maybe we haven't been given the chance to see how much vocals he could showcase in terms of like an upper mix or a kind of falsetto use or anything like that. But right now, all we really have to work with is the fact that he sings down low, brings his voice up a little bit into the low fourth octave sometimes, and kind of stays quite connected, quite big, and he sounds pretty decent. He doesn't really seem to lighten his tone too much as he goes up, so his voice kind of has a ceiling right now. He hasn't showcased much in the way of a mix or lightening his voice to get into kind of bigger areas or belts or anything. He just kind of stays pretty comfortable. But that when he brings it up has a bit of a grab quality to it. It's nice, it's pretty robust, it's a nice pleasant tone. Just in terms of mixing or technique, there isn't really much there, and he can't really sing super high notes or anything like that. As I say, when he's in his comfortable low range, his tuning is much better than Mingy's. He always sounds on pitch, sounds very comfortable, and like his voice has places it can go, just we haven't been shown it as of right now because obviously he doesn't get a huge amount of lines. But yeah, so he kind of stays in this little area, and this whole little area sounds pretty nice. It sounds comfortable, it has a little bit of space to go into, and it sounds balanced. It just isn't dynamically huge and hasn't got masses of potential right now because his voice is a bit thicker, a bit deeper, and kind of sings like that. I say he doesn't really stay mega connected. He kind of still sings light-ish and brings it up a little bit and still sounds light-ish. But his voice is comfortable, it's balanced, it's nicely tuned. It just hasn't got a huge amount to it right now, or at least that we haven't seen. And I think if Yeosang gets more lines in the future, we could see a really, really great vocalist. And of course, these guys are still rookies. They have plenty of time to grow. And I think he is one to watch. His voice could be really good in future once he's given more opportunities to really showcase it. But as of right now, his voice is kind of thick, it's kind of full, and it kind of stays where it's comfortable without too much dynamic range or too much in the way of like really impressive technique. But that again is kind of down to the fact he hasn't been given many lines. So watch this space. I think Yeosang will be a very good singer in future. Okay, so the next two guys I'm changing my mind on every 5 minutes. So I'm just gonna say that Wooyoung is here right now. I think the next two are kind of interchangeable, but we'll get into that. But for me, Wooyoung, as of right now, is in this position, and we'll get into why now. Okay, so Wooyoung's voice is really high. That's kind of obvious. He always sings in this really light, really high, really kind of feminine place. Now, the way he does that is he, again, blasts all the sound in his nose. He has a really, really nasal forward placement, which means that in this upper area of his voice, he sounds very comfortable and really relaxed, but he also doesn't really sing with much power or much grab, so his voice is kind of brittle. It's very pleasant. The tone's really nice and really cute, I guess. It's got a really youthful, bright quality to it, but it sticks in this one area particularly well because of the nasal forward placement and the kind of softer, lighter tone that he implements. When he tries to beef it up a little bit, because his kind of default is nasality, it doesn't really sound very comfortable, and yes, he can go a bit louder with it, but you can see his neck bulging, and he's trying to bring up too much weight to compensate for the lighter tone that he has and the placement that he puts in. And yes, he can get to some of the notes, and occasionally he mixes more into his head, and he sounds really full and really bright and really blaring. He doesn't do that all the time. I wish he did, because then I would put him a lot higher, because that shows he's got potential to do something really quite impressive. But that's kind of only something he does sometimes. He generally stays in his nose or kind of in with a forward facial placement and doesn't really sing with too much grab or too much chest dominant, so his lower range is really undeveloped. He doesn't really do a lot with it. Again, they're rookies, so he has a lot of time to improve this part of his voice, but his voice is high and light and naturally quite brittle, and his default is nasality, rather than using it to get to a higher register. So yes, he sticks in this place, and when he goes up a little bit, he sounds like he's straining a bit because he's trying to bring too much weight up to compensate for the delivery that he normally uses. Even though he does get to the notes, it's kind of impressive, and his potential to get into really high notes is definitely there. Just right now he sings with a softer, lighter coordination, which is basically blasted through his face and through his nose, which kind of gives your voice only one real colour and one real avenue that it can access, and that's kind of fine, but it just lacks the dynamic range of your lower range or kind of other people on the list. So yeah, I think his voice is a little bit limited due to his placement, but it's really pleasant, really nice, and can sing in a key that a lot of people can't operate in because it's a lighter, softer, nicer tone. Okay, so this one may seem kind of surprising. I don't think anyone expected Hyungjun to be this high on the list, and neither did I, but the more I listened to his voice, the more impressed I got, and I have a feeling we have a lot of potential vocally with this guy, but we'll get into his voice in 1 second, but let's have a look.
This is a major tone to ground control. I'm stepping through the door with don't care. 지금 난 혼자가냐 이 시야를 공유할 너가 있기나 굳이 많은 비유는 필요가 없어져. 작은 새벽을 다 새면 다시 내 곁에 잠들겠죠. 사가 된 것만 같아요. 난 그대 품에 별빛을 쏟아내리고 은하수를 만들어 써버릴 듯이 we on fire.
Okay, so what is Hyungjun doing with his voice? Again, he has kind of a higher, naturally nastier tone just when he raps and when he speaks. He's got a really bright vocal quality. But when he sings, his default isn't nasality. His default is kind of to stay a little bit more connected. Again, it's not a huge sound. He stays quite light and quite comfortable. He's got a really relaxing, lovely tone. It's possibly a little bit inconsistent here and there, but he's got really good tuning. His voice sounds naturally bright and youthful and resonant in this sort of area. And it sounds like it's got space to kind of go into low and higher, depending if he has more breath or more of a chord closure. So to me, he's got a slightly better middle range than Wooyoung does, just purely because his voice isn't naturally as in his nose. However, Hyungjun still uses nasality. When he moves up into a high register, he puts it slightly in his nose, but he doesn't blast it all the way through his nose. It's more of a mix. It's not like a really super mega developed mix, like a power singer or anything like that, but you can tell from his middle range to his slightly higher range when he sings in a kind of a more of a belt style, it is going into his nose, and it's a comfortable technique that can get him there pretty much all the time. Now, I don't think he's got the power potential of anyone else further up on this list, so kind of like in an upper mix or like an upper ability, I don't think he can do that too well. But again, his head voice works really nice. When he gets up into his head voice, it's kind of airy and light, but pleasant and really strong, and a decent part of his voice. So yeah, basically I think his natural tone is kind of more chest heavy and more robust and more practiced maybe than Wooyoung's is. It's got more of an avenue down low, so kind of giving more of a dynamic range. And then as he moves up, yes, his voice isn't as high and doesn't have as blaring and big, I guess, a nasal quality as Wooyoung's does, but it kind of uses nasality to get into a higher area rather than having that as default. And for me, that's more of a technical, impressive thing to do, to change a tone rather than have a tone as your default and having a naturally higher voice. So yeah, I think Hyungjun's voice, potential-wise, he could be a really, really great vocalist in years to come. But obviously he's mainly known for his rapping, but his voice has got a lot to it. And I'm really excited to see where it goes because, yes, it's soft and relaxed and nice, but also has a bit more of a grab when he wants to and can move into a really decent, if somewhat underdeveloped mix. So yeah, the sky is the limit, I think, and I'm quite excited to see where he goes. But it may be strange to have a rapper this high on the list that doesn't really sing a lot, but I think his voice has a lot to it. Okay, so now we're getting onto the guys with the varied, strong, and really nice voices. To me, of them, Songhwa's voice is kind of got the least amount of practice and kind of ability in certain areas, but his voice is varied and nice, so let's have a look at it.
많이 마셨나봐요 심장이 막 두근댔고 한참 뒤에 별빛이 내리면 난 다시 잠들 불안한 그 시선 가지고 뚫었어 난 용이 채워지면 그걸로 좋아 이별이 돼 부숴버릴 듯이 real fire 이젠 어둠 속에 네가 있기 떠올리면 나의 하루를 보내는 게 다시 너를 기다리고만 있어 I see swimming pools and living rooms and other place. I'll see a little house on the hill and
Yes, I just want to preface all of this by saying Songhwa has shown some really good vocal improvement. When I was researching his clips from the Mix 9 show, and then his clips kind of V-Lives more recently, and all the stuff he's done recently, his voice has shown a massive improvement, and I think if he keeps improving to this level, as years go by, he's going to have a lot to his voice. Okay, so far of all the singers that I've mentioned, he has the most vocal colours and the most vocal tones that he has access to, by far. His speaking voice is naturally kind of thicker and deeper, not super thick like someone else coming up and Sang and Mingi, but his voice can kind of stay lower quite well. Occasionally he stays more connected, like a da kind of noise, like he does in Wonderland, but that's kind of because of the tonal quality they're going for with that track, kind of going Mingy leaning. But he can kind of stay lower and fuller and more connected, and he has one of the better low ranges in the group, because it's naturally where his voice wants to be. He generally stays kind of more breathy and light when he sings though, and his voice sounds really relaxed, really comfortable, sounds good light and down low, but also as he brings it up, it sounds really light and really practiced and really nice. So far he has really great colours down low, be it thicker and a bit deeper, or be it kind of more airy and lighter in that quality. And then as he brings it up, it still sounds relaxed and still sounds nice. It sounds kind of the most consistent of everybody here, and like he is a trained vocalist. As well as that, he's got a really nice head voice. It's not the best head voice in the group, I don't think, but I'll get into that. But he has a falsetto, he has access to his head voice, which he goes into quite nicely. And his passage navigation's pretty good when he stays light and goes up and down between the two. And he sounds like he has a really nice, light vocal delivery. The only real negative with his voice is, when he kind of goes into a belt, yes, he has the belt, but he's bringing up a lot of weight to get there. Because he kind of sings them on naturally breathy coordination, he doesn't have the practice to kind of mix really well in his belt. So it's a little bit pulled and a little bit strained, like he's using a lot of volume and a lot of chest voice to compensate for the volume due to the kind of more breathy delivery that he has. And it sounds like it won't give out necessarily, but he's pulling back and his neck's kind of going a little bit because he is bringing up a lot of weight, and he closes his eyes sometimes because it means he's struggling a little bit to get there. It just means he's bringing up a little bit too much weight and too much pressure on his vocal cords. If he were to work out how to lighten those cords or bring it into a more balanced mix, he could be very good indeed. As I say, so basically he's got a nice varied vocal tone, nice and light when he wants to, stays more connected when he wants to, and he's improved a hell of a lot. Just pulls a bit of chest voice in his belt, but a lot of people have a tendency to do that, particularly early in their career. So if he develops a really good balanced mix, like some of the guys above him have, and then he could be a really great vocalist. But for now, he's decent, he's not bad, has a lot of colours to it, just needs to kind of alleviate some of the pressure he puts on himself. Okay, so the next three guys are definitely the best singers in Ateez. One of them's particularly good, but we'll get to him. But for me, Jeongho of the three kind of has the most separate parts of his voice. It's the least kind of blended all the way through, but I'll get into what I mean. Let's watch him sing.
So you can keep me inside the pocket of your riches. holding 하늘의 뜻 별 바라보면 생각나는 건가 봐요. 내게 꿈이 아닌 그곳. Come be my teacher. 네 모든 걸 다 가르쳐줘.
Okay, so Yunho's voice is the other guy with the thicker, deeper voice. His voice is naturally kind of more baritonal leaning, and he kind of sings when he really showcases what he can do in a more R&B leaning style. His voice is really smooth and really nice, but it has kind of two separate parts it works really well in. So what I mean by that is when he kind of stays low, he doesn't really use too much of a thick coordination like he could do. He kind of, again, stays light, but all idol singers stay light. It's kind of how they're trained. But his voice sounds really comfortable in this sort of area. It can navigate the low 4th octave and the upper 3rd octave really smoothly, really easily, has decent agility and kind of nice legato phrases when he wants to do that. And then he also has a really lovely falsetto. His passaggio navigation is delightful. He sounds like he has really easy time getting into this head voice, and his head voice has got a good place to go. It's not mega big, it's not super high, it's just really relaxed, really nice, and incredibly consistent. The only reason I put him 3rd is, unlike the other two guys, he doesn't have that bridge necessarily in the middle of his voice. Because his voice is thicker and deeper naturally, he would have to either belt really big and then flip into a bigger, more full coordination that he doesn't really have practice in, and that really developed high balance mix is hard to get, particularly early in your career if that's not what you're focused on. Or he could go really light and have a really head dominant balance mix down the lower end of his range, which is kind of something he does go for sometimes. When he's singing higher songs, he can bring his voice back down into somewhat of a light mix. It is nice, but that's not a part of his voice he really works too well in. So I think his voice is varied and nice and strong, and it's more consistent than Songhwa's, and it has kind of an easier time down low, the better, more consistent, nice tonal quality and better tuning. And he has less of a tendency to pull chest voice. He doesn't really belt into areas he can't belt into. He knows his vocal limitations and doesn't try and sing too far past them. So basically, his lows to mids are really strong, really consistent, light, but very well delivered with a decent amount of agility. His falsetto work is really nice and really very good, and he gets into that area of his voice really well. He just can't really bridge the gap amazingly yet, but again, that will come with practice. They're still rookies. He has time to improve that middle part of his voice. So yeah, I think that Yunho's voice is really good, really decent, has a lot of potential to move into, and he also does like kind of tribal chants sometimes, so he can stay full and connected and shout really well on pitch. So yeah, he's got a lot to his voice, just needs to work kind of on the middle bridging part of it, but that will come. I have full knowledge that will definitely come at some stage. So yeah, his vocals right now are really good, just have kind of two separate parts to work really well in. Okay, so San to me, outside of number 1, has the most blended, smooth, transitional voice, and it has kind of the one that is the most cohesive instrument, I feel like, but I'll get into that. Let's watch him sing.
너는 여기서 멈출 텐가 아끼던 에스토를 높게 열렸어 You get me high sometimes 내 전부를 피하고 싶어 힘조차 없게 날 버려두고 가지 This is how I feel about you Twilight It's like twilight yeah 사랑 이야기라니 쉬는 것만으로도 좋아 Beautiful life, beautiful day Yes, can you feel it through all of the window and silence I'll be there to save the day
Okay, so San's vocal delivery is really naturally quite light and quite youthful and quite bright. He has a very, very soft, lovely voice, but that's nowhere near all he has to it. But when he does stay soft, his whole voice sounds like it has the most legato ability. It has a very easy time getting through all of his range nice and easily. It doesn't sound like he's transitioning into different voices or different parts of his voice with huge, obvious changes in tonal quality. His voice kind of stays really light. It goes into a really head-dominant, lovely, beautiful mix, then into his falsetto, and his head voice work is gorgeous. It's so light, so bright, and so easy and relaxed. He doesn't sound like he's struggling in this area of his voice at all. Again, his voice is quite high, but it's not as brittle as Wooyoung's. It's not as in his nose. It is nasal to a point, but it's just light. It's really soft and really beautiful and gets through all of his range, as I say, with a seamless transition that makes his voice sound like one whole cohesive instrument, and he's not struggling in any part of it at all. As well as that, he can also beef it up a little bit. He seems to be the one that, in most of the songs, who gets kind of the other slightly higher parts, because his voice, when he wants to add more of a grab to it and use more chest voice into a more balanced, strong mix, he can. He has a tendency when he goes too big and too powerful to go a bit throaty. It doesn't crack or anything, but you can tell it's getting to kind of the upper end of his limit when he's using more of a chest grab. But he can beef his sound up. So yeah, basically San's voice is either really light and really cohesive all the way through with a really beautiful blended instrument that gets through all of his range and all of his vocal registers really smoothly and really well, or he can beef it up a little bit and add more of a mix to it, which he does showcase on several different occasions, particularly in Wonderland, where he sounds like he has the second strongest voice. So yeah, I think San's voice is really good. Potential-wise, if he worked on more of a mix and not bringing too much weight up when he wants to add more of a grab, then his voice will be very, very good in future. But right now, it's strong, seamless, and a really beautiful, cohesive instrument. So this is the person I was warned about and told that I would really enjoy, Jeongho. Now, I have a lot to say on his voice. I'm really excited about it, but let's just watch him sing.
마지막 모습이 그게 My style For you are my star in the sky 사랑하는 떠나가는 하늘도 슬퍼서 울어준 날 함께 그때까지 나 그댈 지켜줄 거예요 사랑을 했었나요 Breaking the world, can all say I see you. Take it to everybody, 'cause all you wanted to do was dance.
Okay, so I'll get the boring bit out of the way first. Jeongho, in terms of his general overall vocals, he has by far the strongest voice. It's the one that has the most colours to it. He can stay light like everybody else does, and his voice sounds really relaxed, really comfortable, really good. He can also beef his sound up a little bit in his low to mid-range and sound more robust. He has the most balanced chest voice, the most easy time musically, and has the best tuning, and he has an incredible vibrato ability as well. So yeah, just that alone will make him the best singer, because his whole voice up until that point sounds balanced, sounds easy, sounds really relaxed, and also can sound really full and really powerful. The thing that people definitely want me to talk about is his upper belt. Now, there's a bit of a debate online. Is his technique good? Is it bad? Is it going to cause damage? No, it's really quite good, actually. Basically, what he's doing is he's putting all of the placement in his head, but blasting loads of weight up. And that would be unsuccessful if he kept his mouth really narrow, because your voice would go, and it just wouldn't like it. But he goes, ah, all the time, because he's kind of opening his mouth really wide that gives it that space to be this really bright, really big, huge, enormous sound. Now, his voice is powerful. That is no secret, and the fact it is so powerful is because he's bringing so much weight up, and there is such a grab to it, but because all the placement's in his head, it's not going to struggle. It's really light still and flexible and has space to go into. What's kind of amazing is his technique could still be better. If he sacrificed some of the weight and some of the power and kind of lightened his chords a little bit more and used more of a balanced mix, he would have like 5th octave belt levels of potential. And the fact that he's a year in and can already do what he is doing, I'm very excited for the future. I think, watch this space, in 5 to 6 years, he could be Chen levels of good, and we could be talking about him in kind of that echelon. Because right now he has a huge, powerful, really technically strong instrument that has a decent space to go into, but not a full space to go into. If he, as I said, sacrifice a little bit of power and kind of stay with that technique, but put it more in his head rather than blasting so much weight up, his potential is borderline legendary, and I'm really, really excited to see where it goes, because as of right now it's powerful and big and really good, and is by far the best singer in this group because it has light tones and very good vibrato and great musicality and an amazing belt range. I've heard someone call it a reinforced falsetto. It's not. That's kind of going kind of pushing into it. That's not what he's doing at all. It's just a really big, strong, heavy mixed voice with head and facial placement, with a big open wide sound and a bright quality. So yeah, his voice is exceptional and can only get better. Okay guys, thank you very much for watching. Ateez are absolutely awesome. Next video I'm going to put out is going to be the Q&A, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that. Obviously, I don't expect every single person to watch that, but if you want to get to know me a little bit more, the next video will be the Q&A. Then after that, we'll go back straight into the series, and we're going to be looking at SM Entertainment again with Red Velvet. I know a lot of you guys want that video, so that's the one that'll be coming next. So thank you guys very much for watching this video, and see ya.